Picture an ordinary Tuesday. Somewhere in a busy Roman street, a baker is sliding loaves into a stone oven. A few doors down, a woman is complaining loudly to a food stall owner about what he served yesterday. A dog is stretched out asleep on sun-warmed paving stones, not a care in the world. Nearby, a gladiator rubs oil into his shoulders before a training session, and at a small stone altar, a priest tips wine onto the ground and says words that, this particular morning, nothing is going to answer. The date is August 24th, in the year 79 AD. In roughly 4 hours, every person in this scene is going to look up at the mountain that has always stood over their city, the same mountain their parents and grandparents lived beneath without a second thought, and understand, far too late, that it was never as safe as it looked. What happens next is one of the strangest accidents in human history, because the disaster that kills around 2,000 people is also the exact same event that freezes an entire Roman city in place for the next 2 millennia. Streets, walls, dinner tables, uneaten food, all of it locked in time. This isn't the story of the eruption itself. This is the story of the morning before. A totally unremarkable morning in which 20,000 people went about ordinary business, with zero idea of what was coming. And before we go further, here's something to sit with. If you're already telling yourself you'd have noticed the warning signs and gotten out early, hold that thought. By the end of this, you might not be so sure. Let's rewind to 4 in the morning. Sunrise is still 2 hours away, and the city is already humming. This is something people don't picture correctly about Roman life. It didn't start at dawn, it started well before it. And the people keeping that pre-dawn machine running were overwhelmingly enslaved workers. In a city like this one, somewhere between 3 and 4 in every 10 residents were enslaved, and they were the invisible infrastructure, up before anyone else, making sure the city was functional by the time free citizens opened their eyes. Take the water system as one example of just how advanced this place actually was. 16 public fountains running non-stop, day and night, fed by an aqueduct that stretched some 40 kilometers from the north. In most ancient cities, water meant hauling buckets from a well by hand. Here, it flowed freely on street corners across the entire city. The constant trickle of running water was, in a sense, the background soundtrack of Roman urban life. Proof the whole system was working. Then there's the bread. This city had 35 separate bakeries for a population of roughly 20,000, one for every 570 people or so. That ratio makes sense once you realize most Romans didn't cook at home at all. Multi-story apartment buildings had no real kitchens and no safe way to keep an open flame going. So food production was outsourced to commercial bakeries and food stalls. Long before a single customer walked in that morning, the ovens were already working. And we actually know exactly what was baking, because archaeologists later found carbonized loaves still sitting inside the ovens, preserved by the very same ash cloud that killed the baker who made them. Round, with a scored cross pattern cut across the top, nearly identical to an artisan loaf you'd recognize today. Bread doesn't change shape much in 2,000 years. Someone shaped those loaves expecting to sell them by midday. They never got the chance. Behind the ovens, a blindfolded donkey walked slow, endless circles, turning a volcanic millstone. The quiet engine behind the entire food supply. By 7 in the morning, the streets are in full swing, narrow, loud, chaotic in the specific way only a Roman city could be. Even the road design tells you something about how carefully this place was planned. Raised stepping stones let pedestrians cross the street, without stepping in runoff, spaced precisely wide enough for cartwheels to pass through the gaps. Walk the main street this particular morning, and you'd pass a barber shaving a customer on a stool right out in the open, and a thermopolium, essentially a Roman fast food counter, serving hot stew out of pots sunk into a stone counter. When scientists later tested the residue in those pots, they found traces of duck, pork, fish, snails, and beef. This wasn't bland survival food. This was a city with actual culinary preferences. The money-changing hands looked strikingly familiar too. Small coins for small purchases, bigger denominations for bigger ones. Fixed prices, daily trade, a functioning market economy in every sense we'd recognize. Now the walls. Over 11,000 pieces of graffiti have been catalogued across this city. Campaign slogans, insults, poetry, business reviews. One surviving exchange has a man named Successus writing that he's in love with a barmaid named Iris. Someone else scrawled underneath, Successus wrote back. The argument is still sitting there on that wall, unresolved 2,000 years later. Tucked behind the theatre in the south of the city sits the gladiator barracks, and this was a place obsessed with the games. People picked favourites. They argued about matchups over dinner. They put money on outcomes. Forget the Hollywood image. The top fighters were something closer to professional athletes, with real earnings, real fame, real followings. Their names appeared on walls. What's happening in that training yard this particular morning isn't dramatic. It's routine, technical, almost boring maintenance work. If the food stalls and the barracks show you one version of this city, the private homes of its wealthier residents show you a completely different one. The traditional Roman house was built around a central courtyard. Everything, light, water, sight lines, pulled inward toward that core. It's genuinely beautiful architecture. But that comfort came at a direct cost, and it's worth saying plainly, the woman spending her morning reading letters while an enslaved attendant styles her hair. In the ruins of these homes, archaeologists have found bronze tweezers, hairpins, small mirrors, and perfume bottles that still carry traces of scent. At the entrance to one particular home, the house of the tragic poet, there's a floor mosaic made of thousands of tiny tiles spelling out a warning: beware of the dog. That mosaic has occupied that exact spot since the house was built, and it's still there today, still doing its one job, 2,000 years later. Romans loved their dogs, commissioned art of them, kept them as genuine pets, and somehow this single ancient warning sign is one of the most relatable objects in the entire city. Everything civic converges on the forum. Not just trade, but politics, religion, legal disputes, social status, all of it playing out in one open space. And in the summer of 79 AD, this city happens to be in the thick of an election season. Magistrates were chosen annually by public vote, and judging by the sheer density of campaign graffiti on nearby walls, the competition was fierce. The Forum also houses the city's most important temples, and in this world, religion and civic administration aren't separate categories. They're the same category. Priests function essentially as civil servants. The gods are treated like ongoing contractual partners. You provide sacrifice, incense and prayer, and in exchange you expect protection and favourable signs. That relationship requires daily upkeep, and the priest pouring wine onto the altar this morning is, in a very real sense, doing routine civic maintenance. And somewhere inside that religious machinery, something feels off this morning. A haruspex, a specialist trained to read omens in the entrails of sacrificed animals, performs a reading and doesn't like what he sees. We don't know the specifics of that reading, only the unease survives. Meanwhile, commerce doesn't pause for bad omens. This city's wealth runs on trade around the bay. Wine grown in volcanic soil, olive oil, and above all, garum, a fermented fish sauce that was, without much exaggeration, the most widely traded condiment of the ancient world, shipped from local factories as far as Britain and Egypt. So the harbour is working at full capacity this morning, same as any other, because the garum has to move regardless of what a priest thinks the entrails are saying. Walk through the produce stalls this particular morning, and you'd recognise almost everything on display. Figs, olives, walnuts, dried dates, fresh bread, jugs of wine. The Mediterranean diet, it turns out, hasn't shifted all that much in 2,000 years, and that continuity is oddly unsettling once you notice it. On a residential side street, a stray dog has curled itself into a warm patch of sunlight on the paving stones, completely at ease. The entire city is completely at ease. A dog, warm stone, a patch of sun. This exact tableau has played out in human settlements since long before written history. Hold on to that image, because you're going to want it later. This is the city about to vanish. For the city's children, the school day started at first light. A teacher seated in a chair, students on stools, wax tablets in hand. Village school. Students on stools, wax tablets in hand. The whole lesson happening in the open air, with zero separation from the noise of the street outside. And through literally all of this, the bakeries, the food stalls, the forum, the classrooms, the harbour, green, unthreatening, so familiar after generations that nobody really sees it anymore. What none of these people understand, what nobody anywhere in the ancient world yet understands. Something's wrong with the aqueduct, and someone will fix it soon. This is exactly how humans process ambiguous, slow-building danger. We reach instinctively for the interpretation that requires the least dramatic response. Animals, notably, don't make that mistake. It's a well-documented pattern before major volcanic and seismic events worldwide. Village animals flee. It's a volcano that hasn't erupted in over 700 years. This city has lived through worse before. 17 years earlier, in 62 AD, a severe earthquake devastated the region, and the city spent nearly 2 decades rebuilding from it. In a private garden somewhere, roses bloom around a stone fountain, while a butterfly drifts past, entirely indifferent to what's coming. That framework is about to prove catastrophically wrong. Somewhere in a dining room, a man traces a fresh crack in the plaster with one finger, mentally notes to call a builder, and goes back to his meal. Around 11 that morning, every bird perched along the colonnades of the forum lifts off at the exact same moment. In the days leading up to August 24th, wells across the region start running dry, one after another. Underground, the water table is being pushed and displaced as something shifts beneath the Earth's surface. Today, we recognize this as a textbook precursor to volcanic activity. Nobody in 79 AD has that framework, because the concept of a volcano, as we understand it, doesn't exist yet. The ground itself starts cracking, new fractures appearing in roads and courtyard floors that weren't there the week before, caused by magma shifting deep underground and putting stress on everything above it. Public fountains start falling silent one by one. On one particular street, a fountain that has run continuously within living memory simply stops. The women who arrive that morning to fill their water jars find a dry stone spout and quietly conclude the obvious, least alarming explanation. Something is wrong with the aqueduct. Something's wrong with the aqueduct, and someone will fix it soon. This is exactly how humans process ambiguous, slow-building danger. We reach instinctively for the interpretation that requires the least dramatic response. Animals, notably, don't make that mistake. It's a well-documented pattern before major volcanic and seismic events worldwide. Village animals flee. It's a well-documented pattern before major volcanic and seismic events worldwide. Animals pick up on low-frequency vibrations, shift in gas concentrations, and electromagnetic changes, long before humans notice anything at all. In the stables of wealthier households, horses have been refusing their feed since early morning, pacing, agitated, unwilling to settle. Pacing, agitated, unwilling to settle. Dogs are refusing to go back indoors. And the birds are about to make a mass decision that, frankly, village legends, puts every human being in the city to shame. Small tremors have also been picking up, the kind that rattle cups on shelves and crack plaster. This city has lived through worse before. 17 years earlier, in 62 AD, a severe earthquake devastated the region, and the city spent nearly 2 decades rebuilding from it. So when a tremor rattles the table during a late morning meal, there's already a mental framework in place. This happened before. It will pass. Damage gets repaired. Life resumes. That framework is about to prove catastrophically wrong. Somewhere in a dining room, A man traces a fresh crack in the plaster with one finger, mentally notes to call a builder, and goes back to his meal. Around 11 that morning, every bird perched along the colonnades of the forum lifts off at the exact same moment, not a flock startled by noise, but a coordinated mass departure, moving as one in a single direction, away from the mountain, and they do not come back. It's the same pattern documented before major eruptions elsewhere in the world. Global phenomenon. Every pigeon, sparrow and crow living on the city's rooftops has effectively just voted with its wings. Most of the humans watching simply shrug and return to their business. There are exceptions though. An elderly woman, someone who has watched this mountain her entire life, has clocked the dry wells, the cracked plaster, the fleeing birds, the restless animals, the tremors, and she's afraid. The restless animals, the tremors, and she's afraid. She clutches a small household idol and does the only thing her worldview equips her to do. She prays. Peace before the storm. She isn't wrong to be scared. She's just praying to the wrong department entirely. Here's something the popular version of this story usually gets backwards. Most people actually got out alive, fleeing to safety. The city held somewhere between 11 and 20,000 residents, and the confirmed death toll is roughly 2,000, meaning the clear majority walked out through the gates with whatever they could carry and simply never came back. Final glance. History, for whatever reason, tends to fixate on the ones who didn't leave. Some residents buried valuables before fleeing, fully intending to return once things settled. Village legends of hidden wealth, which we know because archaeologists keep finding stashes of buried silver hidden beneath floors, ancient treasures. Treasure whose owners never made it back to collect it. This was the city of Pompeii, frozen in a moment of mundane continuity that would never resume. Across the bay, at a naval base, a scholar named Gaius Plinius Secundus, Pliny the Elder, author of a 37-volume encyclopedia attempting to catalogue the entire natural world, receives word of a strange cloud forming over the mountain. His reaction to news of an extraordinary natural event isn't to run, it's to call for a ship, so he can sail closer and investigate. He heads directly toward the eruption while everyone else flees the opposite way. His teenage nephew, watching from the safety of the base, later writes 2 letters, describing what he witnessed, and those letters remain our single most detailed eyewitness account of this entire day. In other words, almost everything historians know about August 24th comes down to a 17-year-old standing on a distant shoreline, watching his uncle sail straight into a volcano. Back in the city, most of the people who haven't already left are landing on the same conclusion as the man who shrugged at his dry well earlier. A textbook case of what's now called normalcy bias, one of the most well-documented and most consistently fatal thinking errors humans make when facing a slow-building, unfamiliar threat. Then, at roughly 1 in the afternoon on August 24th, the summit finally gives way. Centuries of built-up pressure beneath the mountain break through the rock above it, and everything that follows happens instantly and completely. A column of ash and gas erupts skyward at incredible speed, climbing past 20 kilometers in a matter of minutes. At its peak, throwing an estimated 1.5 million tons of material into the atmosphere every single second, making this one of the most powerful eruptions in recorded European history. What falls on the city first is pumice. Small, porous volcanic stones raining down like grey hail, accumulating at roughly 15 centimeters an hour over the following hours. Crucially, this phase alone doesn't kill people. This is the window during which many residents make their escape. In these early hours, while the streets are terrifying but still passable, people wrap cloth around their heads for protection, grab what they can carry, and head straight for the city gates. As time passes, that window narrows. Pumice piles up past knee height, then hip height. Roofs start collapsing under the accumulated weight. Ground floor doors become impossible to force open, against the debris piling against them from outside. The streets become impassable, and the darkness turns absolute. The nephew who witnessed it later describes it as darker than any night he'd ever experienced. So complete that a lit torch illuminated only a small circle around itself and nothing beyond it. Others make the opposite choice, deciding, not unreasonably, that a sturdy Roman house with thick stone walls offers more protection than running blind through falling debris in total darkness. And for a while they're right. Gas concentrations inside sealed rooms are measurably lower than outside, and the walls genuinely do shield them. The problem is that the eruption isn't finished yet. Sometime between midnight and dawn on August 25th, the eruption column becomes unstable and begins to collapse. All that material being blasted upwards suddenly has nowhere to go but sideways and down, transforming into what's known as a pyroclastic density current. And this is the mechanism that kills roughly 2,000 people, many of whom had already survived everything up to this point by making every reasonable decision available to them with the information they had. A pyroclastic surge is worse than fire, worse than lava, a superheated wall of gas, ash and rock fragments racing outward, at speeds up to 700 kilometers an hour, at temperatures between 400 and 700 degrees. There's no outrunning it. There's no sheltering from it. It moves faster than sound itself. At roughly 6:30 in the morning on August 25th, the fourth and most destructive surge reaches the city, tearing through it faster than anything living could possibly react to. People sheltering inside the sturdiest buildings available are killed by the thermal blast before the surge cloud has even physically reached their walls. And then, silence falls over the entire bay. A silence that lasts, in a sense, for the next 17 centuries. The city is sealed. Every room, every hallway, every street, every object and every person within them, locked exactly as they were the instant the surge arrived. What makes this preservation almost impossible to fully process is how complete it is. The volcanic deposit created a nearly oxygen-free, moisture-free environment underground, and under those conditions, decomposition essentially halts. Wood survives, fabric survives, food survives, painted walls survive, that bread in the oven survives. The people obviously do not survive, but the shape of them does. The exact posture and position of every body at the moment of death gets captured in ash that hardens around them, and as the bodies eventually decompose from the inside, they leave behind perfect hollow molds inside the volcanic rock. Within a generation, this city vanishes almost entirely from written record. By the medieval period, locals refer to the site only vaguely as the Old City, without any real sense of what it once was. Systematic excavation doesn't begin until 1748, and what archaeologists find isn't what they expect. They anticipated dignified, weathered ruins. Instead, they find a city interrupted mid-sentence, furniture still standing in rooms, food still sitting on tables, a dog still chained where it died, graffiti on the walls dated to the very morning of the eruption. In 1863, the site's director, Giuseppe Fiorelli, notices something odd. Hollow cavities scattered through the hardened volcanic layer, pockets where the rock contained nothing at all. He realizes these are voids left behind by decomposed bodies, and he starts pouring liquid plaster into them through small drilled holes. Once the plaster sets and the surrounding rock is carefully chipped away, what emerges isn't a skeleton or scattered fragments. It's an entire human figure, frozen mid-gesture, clothing folds intact, expressions sometimes still legible. Over 1,000 of these plaster casts exist today, and they remain some of the most emotionally direct objects in the historical record, not because they're gruesome, but because they're so specific. Some capture people caught mid-panic, arms raised, faces covered. Others show people who appear to have simply lain down and accepted what was coming. There's no way to know, in hindsight, which response actually mattered, because ultimately, neither of these responses guaranteed survival.